But we talked a decent amount of Red Sox yesterday on the show, officially eliminated from the postseason. Was this year a success? Was it not a success? For more on that, we're joined by our Red Sox insider, Lou Merloni. He's brought to you by Shaw's and Star Market. How are we doing this week, Lou?
We're doing good. Well, I'm playing golf Monday morning and Tuesday morning.
Nice. Oh, you're like the Red Sox.
Yep, exactly.
Nice.
Yep. So I got my week planned. It's going to be a nice one.
Good. What we asked yesterday, and I guess there's an inverse to this question as well, but would you consider this season for the Red Sox a success?
I think big picture, no. You know what I mean? Because you're the Boston Red Sox, and you should be in the playoffs every single year. And that should be the expectation. 3 years in a row? It's the first time in 30 years you haven't made the postseason. So, no, I mean, that's not a success. You know, that's a disappointment. So then you kind of get over, but the disappointment was the offseason, right? So then you walk into spring training and you look at this group, and Giolito goes down, and Whitlock goes down, and Story goes down week 1, and then Casas goes down 2 weeks later. And I remember the third week of April thinking this is going to be a disaster. But young guys stepped up. So from that point on, based on your expectations, there were a lot of good things. There were some building blocks. There was, your 3 starters kind of gave you 30 starts and kind of got through it and gave you a foundation year. So there were some good things. I think that's why people would say it's a positive. And I've said that in the past. But that's only because your expectations of what they did not do in the offseason to make this team better.
What are the chances they're going to be aggressive in trying to improve the starting pitching? And by aggressive, obviously, I mean spend big money on a starting pitcher.
Well, it's either big money or big assets, meaning a trade. If you go out there and make a big trade for a guy like Gilbert, who's making $1 million a year, but you gave up some serious assets, or Kirby or Crochet, these guys, they're pre-arbitration. Actually, Crochet's on arbitration, but, so that depends. I don't see them in Corbin Burns. Max Fried is a different story, but I do think it's going to come through a trade.
Why go that route? I get it. They're very left-handed. They have a number of either young positional players or positional prospects, and again, they skew left-handed. So I get the organizational logjam, but why not just spend in free agency as opposed to giving up actual talented players or prospects that could help your big league club? You could add Corbin Burns without subtracting. The more I think about that, the more frustrated I get that sounds like it's the approach.
Yeah, and you could. It's just that you've got these 4 guys in AAA that there's no room for. You know what I mean? Where do you put Marcelo Meyer Story is here, he's healthy. I don't know. So Meyer's insurance. Hopefully he can get through a year, so you can go up and down it. And you could say, well, you make room for Roman Anthony, but okay, then why are you going to hold on to Wilyer Abreu? So you can go a few different avenues. You can trade for a big right-handed bat and sign Corbin Burns. But I don't see them just going out and spending for Burns and going out and spending for, Teoscar Hernandez or Bregman or Adames and keeping all of these assets. Because part of the whole thing, too, maybe it's an older philosophy because everybody gets hurt. But it's if I can, trade for a controllable starter, that's 25 years old, that's 3 years left of arbitration, maybe extend him. I feel better about that than giving an 8-9-year deal to a 30-year-old Corbin Burns. So maybe it's just a philosophy.
How many of the big 4 prospects do you think could be on the opening day roster?
Hopefully none. And I say that because, let's just say you put Roman Anthony, your big league right fielder, and Christian Campbell as your second baseman. What if they turn into Jackson Holiday? And they're hitting a buck, in the middle of May, and you're actually trying to win this year, and you got to send them down. Who's your second baseman? Who's your right fielder? To me, put a roster together with none of them on the opening day. So that way they're down in AAA. When the inevitable injury does happen, your season doesn't collapse. Or he's just so damn good that we got to find room for him. You know what I mean? And you make a move. But, I think when you see 162 and you go through these years, you're there every day. Depth is everything. And if you don't have it, you are done. I don't care who you are.
Do you think Trevor Story is the kind of guy who would start the year at short and then move to second for Marcelo Mayer, or would he scoff at that?
I think Alex Cora and everybody else would scoff at that because Marcelo Mayer is nowhere near the shortstop that Story is defensively. If I want to get his bat in, if I want to get him in this lineup, it's I'm not taking Trevor Story off shortstop to put a kid there that's not as good. You saw the way the defense was this year. if you have Story at short and Rafaela in center and Duran in left, you have really good defensive, left side there and up the middle. So defensively, it's not even close. And I'm not sure it is yet offensively. I think he will be a better player. Marcel's going to be a really good player, but defensively, he's not moving Story off short if he's healthy.
Talking to Lou Merloni, our Red Sox insider here on Jones and Keefe on WEEI. Not to keep harping on this, but to circle back to the idea of trading guys off the roster versus signing someone. And you can certainly do both. If depth is everything, in your words, why again are they trading all these guys out of their organization? Why are you trading all these pieces away? They should just go out and spend the money, which I think a lot of us are frustrated with the lack of spending the way they used to. It's not like they don't spend compared to Tampa, but they don't spend the way they used to. So if depth is everything, keep your depth and go sign guys.
Yeah, I wonder what order this is going to go into, right? Because remember Dombrowski would be like, I need a starter, I need an ace and a closer. And first week it was Price and Kimbrel.
Yeah, done.
Okay,
right? Yeah,
right.
Yep.
So is it? Let's dive into free agency, which slows the trade market because maybe we do go after Burns and Fried, which by the way I'm all for. I'm all for getting both of them, and then it's okay, well, that's not that bad. That's a reasonable deal. We feel comfortable. We got the player. We're good. Now let's look at free agent bats. And if you lose out on a bat or you lose out on an arm, now you've got the flexibility to dive into a trade market, right? So I'm curious, do you dive into a trade right away? Or do you just sort of feel out the free agent market with pitching and hitting and see if you're in the ballpark, see if you can sign some of these guys, and then find out what hole you need to fill through trade? So, by the way, I'm fine with it. A lot of money's coming off the books. They're way under last year.
Right.
They're losing their entire back end of that bullpen. That's what, $26, $27 million. They're already under. Pavetta's going to be off. O'Neal's going to be off. So, there's plenty of money to spend on two big-time free agents. And like you said, keep the depth.
Now, obviously, they had a ton of guys start games for him this year in the rotation because of injury. So you always need more than you think. But obviously, Tanner Houck established himself this year as a guy you can rely on. I assume you can pencil in Cutter Crawford for next year, and then so how many of these guys are sort of locks for next year's rotation?
I'd say Bayo, Houck, Crawford, and they're going to give Giolito every opportunity to kind of be that fifth, right? And if he's, who knows? His career's been up and down, right? If he gives you 30 starts in that fifth spot, you'll take it. So there's one glaring hole, because I don't see Pavetta coming back. There's one glaring hole, and that glaring hole is either a Burns, Max Fried, or trade Seattle, Chicago, wherever it may be, Miami, I don't know. So I think you need one guy in that rotation, and this is something that behind the scenes, not in the big leagues, that Breslow has done with the Richard Fitzes of the world, with the Quinn Priesters of the world, with the Sandlins, AA, AAA arms to try to build some kind of depth, and I'd imagine Criswell's in that category next year in Worcester, that you have four starters down in AAA that you're okay, you can come up and do what Fitz just did for 4 starts. Then maybe you option him back down. You know what I mean? So that's the flexibility. That's the depth you need.
And when they signed Kenley Jansen, they got a all-star caliber closer for 2 years, veteran guy, 1 million career saves, but it was on teams that didn't even make the playoffs. So now going forward, do you think they go that route again, established veteran closer, or do you try to find a kid that can do it and a cheaper guy maybe throws 100 miles an hour or something like that?
Yeah, that's where I'd like to see them really dive in and get like you said, an established one. You did it with Kenley, you did it with Martin, and you were rewarded by it. They were exactly what they were. You know what I mean? And this year, a little up and down injuries, whatever, but for the most part, they were exactly what you bought. So, you got Liam Hendricks coming back. Don't rely on him. You got Whitlock coming back. Don't rely on him. Go out and get a Tanner Scott, a lefty closer, who can pitch the ninth in case Hendricks has a little hiccup or Whitlock's not the same. You've got Slayton. So they got to rebuild the back end of that. But you're right. I want an established adult, because there's been so many times when Kenley has come in the last 2 years and it's got a little hairy and he gets out of it. And I'm that's the difference. That's a veteran reliever, that a closer that's done it 47 times compared to the youth that we had for the 2 years previous that you were just you could just see it coming. You could just see the meltdown coming in Yankee Stadium or wherever late.
We've talked about Tristan Casas the last couple of weeks with you, and maybe this question ties into that. What do you do with Devers long term? Is he a third baseman? Is he a Red Sox long term? What's the plan with Rafael Devers?
Well, first off, I think he's a Red Sox, long term. And I think where he plays depends on what they do with Casas. To your point, everybody is talking about Casas, not trading him. And I've mentioned it before. I think everything is on the table. But if you don't have to, and you can keep Casas and Devers and go get a right-handed bat to hit between them, you might be better off. The problem is like, what can you get for him? Like, for the type of arm that we're talking about, and you could go get, just pay for it, but if it's a trade, his name will come up. So I think Devers is your third baseman, and they got to, if DeCasas is here. If not, I think he moves to first right away. But they got to figure out how to keep this guy healthy. He was having a career year up until what happened in Colorado in the last month and a half. He's just a shell of himself.
Do you think, you detailed this earlier, they've missed the playoffs 3 years in a row, first time since 10 to 12. They haven't had a longer stretch in 30 years, missing the postseason. That's at stake next year. Do you think it bothers them? Because a lot of, and I'm not talking about the players, I'm not talking about even Alex Cora, I'm talking about higher than that, organizationally, ownership, Sam Kennedy. Does it bother them that they've missed the playoffs 3 years in a row? Because outside looking in, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I know. I hope so. Right? I mean, that's like the correct answer. They say it, and I hear Sam talk about it all the time, and Tom, and we don't really hear John that much, but they say it, but I really hope that it gets to them, and that's why I hope that, this offseason, we've been hearing a lot about you got to build through the minor leagues, and this is like going to be a rebuild. I mean, they don't really say it, but we all know it, and well, they have. They have built through the minor leagues. I mean, you've got 6 or 7 or 8 or 12, like under, arbitration years, first and second year players. You get the best player in the minor leagues. You get the minor league player of the year. You get 2 other top 25 prospects. Like you're there. So now it's time. This is almost like the time when Dave Dombrowski walks into an organization and next year you're in the World Series because he looks at your team and go, what do you guys do? Why are you guys waiting for? Like, what are we waiting for? Let's go sign this guy, make this one trade, and let's go. And that's kind of like the area that they're in right now. That's why I think it could be a very important offseason.
Red Sox paid for Chris Sale to win the Cy Young in the National League this year. And, Jones and I we actually feel the same way. Like, we wouldn't have expected 30 starts and an unbelievable season here in Boston. So I'm not freaking out about that. But when you look at the specifics of the trade, you're paying for so much of his deal, and you got Vaughn Grissom in return, who maybe turns into a really nice player, but this year was basically a lost year for him. So how frustrated should Sox fans be allowed to be about the Chris Sale deal?
Well, they should be frustrated with the return for now, right? Because, like I said, I mean, if Grissom was hitting 285 with 16, 18 homers and looked like your second baseman of the future, you could stomach that. You could say, oh, all right, good for Chris. Nobody saw this coming. But, Sale is like, it's interesting because remember that rumor or that story that the Rangers wanted to trade for Sale like a year and a half ago? Like that, when that became public, everybody wanted Bloom fired for not trading him. And I think at the time when they traded him, a lot of people were like, whatever, I'm tired. Well, actually, when he was still in the Red Sox, nobody believed in Sale, like in the offseason, that he was going to just get hurt, that they should just move on. And the minute they traded him, all of a sudden it became, how can you do that? Like, why would you ever do that? And now he's won a Cy Young. So it's kind of revisionist history. I mean, for the most part, most of the Red Sox fans I talked to, like that in the past, don't believe in him, didn't trust him, didn't think he would get through 15 starts, thought he'd always be hurt, and if you could move on and get something, do it. The problem is Vaughn Grissom. We don't know what he is, and we still don't know what he is.
Okay, he is Lou Merloni, our Red Sox insider, joining us here on Jones and Keefe. Lou, we appreciate the time. Good luck on the golf course, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, boys. Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks, Lou.
All right, Lou Merloni joining us here, brought to you by Shaw's and Star Market. I should point out,
yes,
we asked Lou about Joe Castiglione's final broadcast. Last week we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Here on WEEI on Sunday, and I think various innings are going to be simulcast on NESN as well. Our farewell to Joe Castiglione.
It's going to be a who's who,
broadcast on Sunday. Yeah.
Dropping by as well. There's going to be a ton of former Red Sox in attendance. And again, Joe's been doing the games for 42 years. So
I heard Greg say this earlier today. Greg's like, yeah, it was basically my, the only person I really remember doing Red Sox games. I'm like, yeah, it is. The only person in our lifetime is it.
So basically,
swing and a pop-up.
So any player you and I can think of having watched or listened to or anything, like Joe did their game. So when you see the list of people that are involved, it's like guys from the teams in like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, like last year. It's everything. So, yeah, that'll be Sunday. So that'll be pretty cool.